Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Let me start with a big thank you to Dr. Christian Turner for his Eat, Tweet, Farewell last night. Lots of interesting people, fantastic dinner. And I tweeted this morning, more than a Balozi, which is an ambassador. I said, a tour de force, farewell Dr. Turner, and Karibu Nick Haley, who's going to be his next ambassador. Really had an interesting time. It was also a pleasure to meet John Miller, Senior Vice President of Nestle Africa, South Asia and Pakistan. Incredibly, we were both at Durham University, not together, but and then we were remembering a pub slightly outside Durham which served these amazing Bloody Marys, and we just looked at each other and couldn't believe that both of us had enjoyed the same thing at the same pub. Home thoughts. I took this photograph of the morning sunrise, well, more of the clouds really. I'm just outside the house. We've had a lot of rain lately, and the scent that lingers after a nice rain is called Petri Chor. This morning I turned around at 5 and I found my little person Hannah, who's not so little anymore, and I thought to myself, I'm going to have a 15-minute lie-in, because children grow up and these moments are in fact momentary and fleeting. Political reflections. Obama says China must stop land reclamation in South China Sea, so that's not going to go down well. I like this from Historical Pics. John F. Kennedy enjoying a cigar. On the 16th of November, I said, if Paris was not the climactic finale, then we need to consider how hyper-terrorism is going to affect the globalized economy. And then Bloomberg put up an article which was measuring the cost of global terrorism, which is at a 9/11 high. Have a look at this chart. And then Pepe Escobar, very interesting piece in the Asia Times. White, ultra pro, black clad head to toe, AK-47 toting, very well trained, precision killers, as described by eyewitnesses. For now, what's certain is that when Daesh went on overdrive, no intel service seems to have seen it coming. They attacked Russia via Sinai spin-off, bringing down the Metro jet. They attacked Lebanon, Shiites as a whole, Hezbollah, and indirectly Iran via the bombing in the Burj al-Barajneh Shiite neighborhood of Beirut. Symbolically, that was an attack against the 4+1, Russia, Syria, Iran, Iraq, plus Hezbollah. They attacked NATO at the heart of Paris. Hollande's act of war crucially implies an attack against all NATO members. Incredible as it may seem, moderate rebel facilitator Turkey included. The strategic benefit of opening a war on 3 fronts and attacking both Russia and NATO virtually at the same time is more than dubious. These are Caliph Ibrahim's European army, young, born and bred in the EU, usually double nationality, statistically invisible. Totally integrated locally. What first struck me in Paris is how the targets in the 10th and 11th arrondissement were carefully chosen. The star of the show seems to be the smiling man, Abdelhamid Abouad, aka Abu Omar al-Baljiki, which French intel is now floating as the possible mastermind of the Paris massacre. Talk about a jihadi superstar. He delights in social media, gives interviews to jihadi outlets, organizes attacks. The previous one last January failed. Humiliates Belgian security with his back and forth between Europe and Syria, and always manages to concoct a daring escape. As a piece of casting, he certainly beats Ben Whishaw as Q. Further discrepancies are evident when the 3 teams of the Paris carnage are compared. The Stade de France featured absolute patsies trying to enter a high-visibility football match in a heavily policed stadium wearing a suicide vest, just expendable martyrs, Syrian passport and all. The Bataclan team featured calm, relatively proficient shooters, but still martyrs. They knew a hostage situation, and France could only finish with their martyrdom, less expendable, but still expendable. The heart of the matter is the drive-by team, or teams. The investigation seems to be clueless about them. The killers at La Belle Equipe arrived on a black Mercedes, according to witnesses. There is no mention of this Mercedes anywhere. The killers were ultra-pro, muscular, methodical, and white. These are the non-expendables, the high-priced mercenaries, while the whole media circus spreads from Grenoble and Toulouse to Brussels and even Raqqa. They have simply vanished without a trace. No one knows who they are. No one knows who hired them. Hardly social network jihadi al-Baljiki. Belgian police believe Belgian Abdul Hamid Abouad al-Baljiki is the mastermind of Paris attacks. I'll put up his photograph. And then we learned from various sources that new analysis appears to show one person involved in Friday's attack had not been accounted for. Witnesses suggested a third man had been in a black seat with Saleh Abdeslam and his brother Ibrahim as they drove around the French capital engaging in machine gun attacks. And then subsequently today we saw a standoff and a female lady in a suicide vest blow herself up. So we're still going to get more information. The hotbed is seen to be in Belgium. Welcome to Molenbeek. Talk about how this place fits into the Paris attacks. TSA Algerie was tweeting about the Saint-Denis standoff, which seems to have now reached a close. CNN reported, amongst others, early in the morning that 2 Air France flights were diverted Tuesday night because of bomb threats. Bortnikov of the Russian side said, "We can definitely say this was a terrorist attack," referring to Airbus A321. And over the weekend I said, what is evident is that ISIS has struck deeper into the very heart of Fortress Europe and higher, 35,000 feet, the case of Flight 9268. On the 25th of August I mentioned that planes were simply falling out of the sky like flies, and I referenced Don Delillo. We're not witnessing the flow of information as much as pure spectacle, or information made sacred, ritually unreadable. The small monitors of the office, home and car become a kind of idolatry here, where crowds might gather in astonishment. Let's move on to currency markets. Euro 106.60, dollar index 99.64, Japanese yen 123.39, pound 152.18, Aussie 0.7103, Indian rupee 66.105, South Korean won 1172.90, Rial 380.93, the Egyptian pound 783.01, and the Rand 1431.42. Have a look at the 3-month dollar index chart. This is clearly going higher. December rate strike is now clearly in view. But bear in mind that will be a rate hike into very thin market conditions, and I think that's something that needs to be considered. Euro dollar trades very soft, though we're back at 106.61. Gold trading at 10.69, which is a 5-year low, triple digits, here we come. Crude oil is having a little bit of a bounce this morning, last trading at $42.41, but I think it's headed to a 30 handle. Interesting piece on Dubai. Dubai's slowing economy, the rout in commodities, strict debt repayment laws are reviving a phenomenon that symbolized the Emirates crash in 2009, skips. A rising number of small and medium-sized company owners are abandoning the UAE without repaying debt. Skips, business owners who quietly leave the country to avoid punishment for defaulting on loans. Have a look at this photograph I took last year of Dubai in the afternoon. Sub-Saharan Africa, lovely piece in The Guardian by the outgoing Africa editor Vuvuzelas Pistorius and Mugabe's warped rule, My 6 Years in Africa, saying we would soon discover that in journalistic parlance there are 2 South Africas, and for that matter 2 Kenyas, 2 Nigerias, and indeed 2 Africas. Perhaps more than 2. Africa is large, it contains multitudes. The banner headline of the early 21st century was Africa Rising. Fast-growing economies, fashion shows, internet entrepreneurs, cool cats sipping gourmet coffee in rescued urban spaces. Suddenly everyone had a mobile phone, from the expanding black middle class to the farmer, the remotest village looking up crop prices. And wherever you looked, there were cranes dotting the sky, airports, bridges, railways, roads and stadiums, usually with signage in Chinese script. Yet in their rush to proclaim the demise of the old, miserable, misunderstood Africa, and tell citizens that they never had it so good, the politicians and captains of industry too often fail to appreciate paradox. The continent is not immune to the global disease of inequality. Boom times in countries such as Angola have left millions behind in mega-city squalor. Some of the stars of growth and development, most obviously Ethiopia and Rwanda, are among the worst sinners when it comes to democracy and human rights. Interesting piece by Martina in the Wall Street Journal, Big African Debt Burdens Written Off Are Back Again, saying that rock stars helped convince the international community to write off more than $100 billion of African government borrowings a decade ago. Now the big debts are back and it's getting tougher for countries to pay them off. Mozambique was one of the biggest beneficiaries of debt forgiveness, with its debt slashed from 86% of GDP in 2005 to 9% the next year. The country has built it back up since then to 61% of GDP. Ghana's debt was 82% of GDP in 2005, just before the international community forgave about half of it. It's now up to 73% of GDP and growing. This is a tale all across the continent. In some cases, like Ghana, the increase has been quite alarming. This certainly isn't the future that the international institutions had in mind when they launched the debt relief effort. Moving on, AFP Africa, President Kagame reacted on Twitter after the Senate voted unanimously to allow him a 3rd term. He's a shoo-in. South African all shares down 3.36% in November, but bounced 0.84% yesterday. Dollar rand, I think, will print 15 now, looking at the way the markets are moving. Egyptian pound, 783. Egyptian stock market at a fresh 23-month low. It's down 28.22% year to date. Nigeria's economic growth slowed to 2.84% in Q3. The previous year it had a 6 handle. Nigerian all share down 18.2% this year. Ghana Stock Exchange Composite Index down 12.95% year to date. Kenya's central bank held its benchmark lending rate unchanged at 11.5%, saying that the exchange rate had stabilized and the current account deficit had narrowed. Another announcement that came out of the central bank was that they were not going to give any more new licenses, banking licenses. On the 9th of November, I wrote about this enormous volatility we had seen, and I called it, "Wow, what a ride." But I said then, in the immediate term and after some stomach-churning turbulence, we have sight of the landing strip. And on that note, let me put up a photograph of Hannah in the waiting room at Lewa at the airport. Very high water levels in Samburu as the Iwaso New floods. Have a look at that photograph. Nairobi all share up 5.215% in November, strong November, off the back of Safaricom, which is up 12.54% since releasing its first half earnings, which was on November the 4th or the 5th early morning. Barclays Bank up 8.59% this month has also been a strong showing. NSE 20 is up 3.16 since the 3rd of November, but down 22.72% year to date. I will be off tomorrow because I'm speaking in Eldoret, but I'll be back on Friday. I thoroughly appreciate your support. Thank you.